You are listening to Radio Belvaspata, South Africa. This show is dedicated to those who live and love from the heart in infinite ways. In today's episode, we will discuss, share, gain insights, and get clarity on the wisdom and teachings of the mystic and seer Almin, as well as discover more about the miraculous healing modality called Belvaspata. Your host for this show is Paul.
And a warm welcome to Radio Belvaspata, South Africa, broadcasting live out of Benoni, east of Johannesburg. This is the 1st of December, World AIDS Day, and I'm sharing the space today with the wonderful healing master, Diane, who's going to be sharing some of her journey with us. And we're going to be discussing things like toffee apples. We're going to be talking transcendence and treason. To start off with, our opening comment is some Toltec aphorisms, and the theme of the show really revolves around creating contentment and fulfillment in one's life. Contentment arises from the knowledge that wherever we are in the moment has taken eons to achieve and is therefore our greatest gift. When conditions are placed on when we will allow ourselves to be happy, we have enslaved ourselves to needs and closed off the wondrous possibilities of the future. So once again, hello everyone, and hello Diane.
Hi, Paulie. Hi, everybody. So wonderful to be here.
So good. We're going to be having all sorts of processes, and you've come up with the theme of the show tonight and the title of the show, so we're going to get into that. You know, it was interesting, just before we were talking about the aspects as taught in Belvaspata of transmutation, transfiguration, transformation, the 3 T's.
Yes.
And I'm looking tonight, our title is Toffee, Apples, Transcendence and Treason. So we have another 3 T's there, which must be meaning something.
Absolutely. You can see I'm an English teacher because I love the poetic approach, and that alliteration of the T's repeated just appealed to me.
Wonderful. So you've been through a whole lot of stuff this last week or 2 weeks, and transcending, I think, a lot of the processes for yourself.
Yes.
Let's share a little bit about that as we're going along, but I'd like to just read a post that Almin taught 2008, 2009, and that'll trigger off a whole lot of other processes for us.
Wonderful.
So it's called Cleaning the Obsolete Patterns of Decay, and it's beautiful in that Almin poetry, you know, the way that she writes. I've always loved that. Clear from the blood, spirals of old, 144, but death they hold. Clear from the air your lungs do breathe, patterns of despair, deprivation and grief. Clear from muscles, patterns of stress, from ligaments and joints, strife and duress. From the heart, predestined patterns that should no longer be, brought by the blood of previous destinies. Clear the hormones that bring about decay, the life hormones alone must stay. As the spine is cleared, the cerebral fluid must be too. Use the symbols given to you. Clear now the lymph, by density beset. That which was but a dream, the body must forget. The nervous system has been in modes of fight or flight. Clear it this day with symbols of light. So absolutely beautiful, and I've taken a lot from that this particular week, because as we were preparing for the show and we found that bit of information, I've been repeatedly reading it over and over. Absolutely fascinated, because it says everything in there that we work on in terms of our own healing, and I think that one of the things that I've taken this week is that we have to really look at that internalized process within the self of constantly healing and adapting and changing to what is in front of us.
Yeah, and so often something appears and we place very little value on the appearance. And I love the way she talks about from ligaments and joints, strife and duress. And that's particularly apt for me over these last couple of weeks. So we'll talk about that just now. Yes, and of course the illusion, the illusions that manifest into the body. We talked, many, many times about the body being the vehicle for a miraculous and wondrous life. And however, the body also knows, and it picks up the manifestations of obsolete programming as well.
And I think that is because it's such a dense process, and as we all know, lightning strikes to the densest place it can. It hits ground immediately. And I think that's what goes on when we have that inner realization, even if it's conscious or not. We ground that particular thing that hits the bones, it hits the body, it hits all these aspects of it, and then we have to actually start to work through it.
Well, I wonder even if we have a choice. There's no other choice but to work through it, and to continually choose to ignore and to bury one's head in the sand. Can only lead you astray.
Absolutely. Really can be incredibly difficult. And I think pre-show, some of the conversation we were having about no longer living in a state of opposition, but actual recognition of what it is that you have to do. And if we could just hold on to that fact when something is going on, we go, hang on, don't oppose it, work with it.
Yes.
It becomes much more powerful, even though we may be experiencing a lot of pain or those kind of processes.
No, Paul, I think you're absolutely right, because the thing is, to view these experiences as adversarial, in fact, creates the opposition. And what you oppose then becomes opposition. And that's really when life becomes, sometimes the suffering becomes unbearable.
What were you saying just before we began the show tonight about you'd find some comment or some post by Almeen where she was highlighting these aspects of no longer being opposition? Can you remember?
For the moment it's gone, Paul, but it'll come back to me, I'm sure.
Okay, well, bring it in whenever we can.
Yes.
And let's look at that, because that was like one of those huge aha moments of just absolute realization.
Well, that's the thing that's been happening over the last couple of weeks, is this one of the things, is that we have the aha moment, and within moments it's disappeared.
Have you noticed?
Yes.
Have you noticed? And I think it's this need to hold on to these processes as information.
Yes.
But they're so fleeting. But obviously realization has done its work, so it must go and move on for the next thing. But yes, we tend to want to hold on to things just for information's sake, to walk around like we're filled with the wisdom of all of these realizations, and it's not valid any longer, or we don't need it.
That image that we were talking about pre-show, about the juggler keeping the balls in the air, all these light bulb moments, we continually want to, send them up into the air, view them, feel them, be affected by them, instead of being grateful and letting it go.
Yeah, really incredible. Things we're still learning. And I hope to continue to learn all of that. So, shifting it. Okay, well, we have a small audio, a short audio from Almeen. It's taken from the Pathways to Ascension course, and it's Almeen talking about ascension versus resurrection. So let's just hear some of those comments, because it'll lead into the rest of the show for us.
Good.
Let's take a look then at what is resurrection, because this is a little confusing to most light seekers when they speak about resurrected beings, and on the other hand they speak about ascended beings. So we can define ascension even a little bit further by comparing and contrasting with resurrection, and then we will also take a look at how it compares and contrasts with death. Ascension is, in fact, the vibrating to a higher level of the physical body and the etheric, more subtle bodies of a being. In other words, they vibrate generally as we have understood it in the past, but I am going to show you that even that has changed. However, we've always assumed that an ascended master is not here in the flesh. Well, that used to be true, because ascended mastery meant that you vibrated the cells of the body. In other words, the song of the body went up an octave, at least. And so, as the cells of the body vibrated and went up 1 octave, the master, in fact, moved right out of here, taking their bodies with them. No longer in the flesh, able to come and go to the flesh as they wished, but they generally wished to stay in the ascended mastery realms, not here amongst the milling crowd, not here in the throngs of what to them feels like confusion. As of February of 2005, the Infinite gave commands that ascended masters preferably, although they have a freedom of choice, preferably stay in physicality. It is imperative that physicality be archetypally representative of all kingdoms, of the ascended mastery realms, in fact, even of what lies beyond, which is the God kingdoms. So ascended mastery used to mean that you vibrate your cells with such a high frequency that it becomes invisible to the average eyes of man, and that you take it into higher levels where the ascended masters dwelled. They were also called the White Brotherhood, or the Brotherhood of Light, or the Masters of the Earth. They have come from all walks of life, from all different races, and from all religions, or spiritual paths for that matter. So, my brothers and sisters, if that is what ascended mastery was, now the only difference is that that master deliberately lowers his or her frequency, retaining their very large light. And of course, the subtle light is not always visible to humankind, but retaining their light and also keeping lower their frequency so that they stay in physicality. Now, resurrection, on the other hand, is something a little bit different. Resurrection comes when somebody has almost gone into the ascended mastery realms, but they didn't quite make it. Or during their final moments of life, they did such a glorious act that it raised the frequency of their body. For instance, in war where somebody self-sacrificingly and knowingly offers their life for others. This raises the frequency very high. In fact, there's a very beautiful scripture that says, "For no greater love hath man, but that he gives his life for another." Fortunately, the days of martyrdom are over. Our highest service now is not to die or to suffer. It is to live a glorious ascended life of majesty in perfect love and light. What happens when somebody gets that close to ascended mastery, but then they pass away? Well, there either is the grace of the ascended masters or the infinite that will assist that person to go just that one extra little notch, and then the body will rise again, even though it tasted of death. But there's another way that it is more generally done. That person resurrects themselves. And it goes like this. For the moment, understand that when death occurs, the act of recapitulation brings tremendous insights. Recapitulation is very commonly called by people as "my life passed before my eyes." In fact, it's often used in jokes when people said, "Oh my goodness, my life passed before my eyes." They are saying they came close to death. When the life passes before our eyes, we learn such perception. We gain such insights. We see how every joyous moment we lived contributed more to life than all the self-sacrificial work that we did. We learn a great deal about love and about service and about living our highest truth. We see things for what they are and what they were. And in doing that, light floods us with perception. And when that happens, if the spirit lingers around the body, in fact, the body can rise again and the spirit will go back into the body. And this is how resurrection takes place. As you can see, entirely different from the ascension, which will vibrate it up. The body never tastes of death.
Thank you for staying with us. This is Radio Belvaspetar, South Africa. Thursday, the 1st of December. You are in studio with Diane and Paul, and we're talking about creating the magnificence of contentment and fulfillment in our lives and all the experiences that we go through as we transcend that which is obvious and that which went before. And a beautiful moment there just to understand the aspects of how we begin to shift and change through the ascension and resurrection process.
Well, Paul, listening to that makes me once again realize the body as a vehicle. And if I look back over these last couple of weeks, I realize how I manifested this horrendous pain that I've been experiencing in my hip. And 2 or 3 weeks prior to the pain actually manifesting, a problem which is a repeated problem appeared in my life again. And I spent probably 2 or 3 weeks tussling with it, strategizing, analyzing, trying to control outcome, not sleeping. In fact, one of our T's in our heading tonight is Treason. In fact, I see that almost as a kind of self-abandonment. And there's no doubt about it that I abandoned the self.
And self-sabotage comes into that, which I know we've spoken about in a few shows this year.
Well, that's exactly what I did. I self-sabotaged all that authentic living would have guided me into. So 2 weeks prior to the pain, this was going on, this tussling and this orchestrating. And what happens then, I could feel this fear, the fear of not wanting things to change, the fear of withdrawing. And I realized that fear poleaxes you. And the terror that overcame me was then manifest in my joints, in my hip. And I realized that I actually had manifested, that the body had picked up on it, the body knows.
And made you completely immobile as well, that you just were frozen in fear. This is what I'm hearing.
And that's exactly what happened. Even the physio who I was going to eventually, she said, Diane, it seems as if you've got this protection around you. You don't want to be hurt. And the body is protecting itself. And I think that kind of armor, which when you in that flight or fight mode, you think you need armor. You need to protect yourself. So, Paul, it's been an amazing couple of weeks because despite the pain which poleaxed me, which kept me from moving, which kept me on the couch and kept me terrified, eventually gave way to a kind of calm. And there were great insights that in retrospect now can see. One of the main things was, one of the greater insights was that going into the unknown, because that's what I was terrified of, going into the unknown has to be done in absolute surrender. surrendered trust. So that became a mantra for me, knowing that I have to be in absolute self-surrender.
And trust, complete trust for that,
yes.
Going
into the unknown. That was number one. Secondly, I realized that if you are in such pain and such illusion and such separation consciousness, you cannot find any compassion for another, for yourself least of all.
Wow.
And it made me realize that people who I know who are ill, who have chosen to walk that path, actually are unable to look past their own pain. And that made me see beyond the appearance, that it's not the fact that they're disinterested, that they're cruel, that they're stubborn, that they're selfish. They actually cannot do it. And
so that's held them captive in a process.
Yes.
Which, yes, sometimes I would recognize I might judge that as something, but I mean, I'm not walking in their shoes, so...
Yes.
Okay.
But Paulie, I've done that. I've actually judged it and said, so selfish and so self-absorbed. But this stint that I've had made me realize that they are unable, or they are of the perception to think that they are unable. Yeah. And I managed to then see past the appearance. It was not a stubbornness. It was not a cruelty. It was simply an inability.
I'm hearing that you're recognizing that you were more than that, and we're just allowing that then to transcend all of those pain and all that insights of everything that you were going through.
But you know what is astounding? That if we do not have a self-examined life, that little gift is a passing thing, and you miss the beauty of it. The life has to be examined. The fear has to be looked at. And
otherwise,
examined.
It would just be suffering, would it not?
Yes. And you would be the victim.
Yeah.
You'd be the victim. Damn! Look what is being done to me. So it's imperative not to be in victim consciousness.
The question I've got, Diane, in terms of a lot of the current information that we're getting surfacing, from Elmine and from within the Light family around the world, do you think you've seen the last of that fight and flight syndrome within yourself? Do you think that something has shifted and transcended to a level where something which we might not know, because that's the unknown, has now transcended those two options of duality?
Paul, I can only just say for the moment.
Okay.
For the moment, I see the light. For the moment, I'm in the eye.
Okay.
But I so easily slipped out of it.
Yeah. And I'm sure that's a bit of a shocker, because we tend to think we've done so much work and this shouldn't. We begin to judge ourselves through all of that, and absolutely I understand that particular process.
So for the moment, it seems that examining the life, doing the protocol for the joints, going through, which shifted and moved things. But I also wondered that if we did not live that self-examined life, we would...
You'd still be suffering, lady, wouldn't you? Eh?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow, it's such an incredible story, and thank you for sharing from your heart, and so open on that particular level.
Oh, no, Paulie, I really wanted to do this because so often we've been taught that unless you really want to get some insights, you have to suffer for it. I mean, that's part of the social conditioning that we have.
That's the programming that goes on. No pain, no gain, honey.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's done.
Yeah.
That's done.
Wow. So things have shifted for you completely. Yes. I mean, I've been looking at these. It's a much gentler look, I think, that's coming out lately. Instead of doing all this work and doing the work and doing the work, which, yes, I understand we're going to be doing all of that. Yes. And I'm enjoying it because it's a journey. But for me, I'm working at the moment on just dissolving that which no longer has relevance for me. And just the softness of dissolving is far better than trying to get rid of it.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the thing, looking at this particular right hip joint, is the necessity of getting rid of obsolete too rigid perspectives and doing it differently, working with it anew. And if we look at the various perceptions, the 7 perceptions, that's one of the levels where the usual stagnation and the way of doing things is replaced by represencing, replacing it with new perspectives. And that we do on an archetypal level as well.
And one of the archetypes also being the inner child,
yes,
which we've been discussing in great abandon the last 6 months or so amongst ourselves, and obviously on the show. So we've come to huge realizations there along the way.
But Paul, this inner child, it is a paradox, because there's such a capacity for joy, such a capacity for tasting the sweetness of life, the toffee apples of life. But there is also the importance of having a parented inner child. Yeah. Because otherwise that child is voracious. It will hold you captive.
Yes, and take over everything without balance, because it is so exuberant and so enthusiastic for life. Absolutely. There. It's a great way to be in when you are in certain processes, but so this is where the title comes in tonight of Toffee Apples, sharing the joy of the inner child. For our Northern Hemisphere family, Toffee Apples translated as candy apples. I'm sure everyone knows that. But just to let everybody know that it's a great delicacy for us. And since you gave me the title, I've actually been going, can I find a great recipe for a toffee apple? Now let's make those.
Let's manifest them.
I remember it from childhood. There's a memory there of great joy from childhood. There's some association there of just absolute joy. And I know if I'm going into the supermarket up the road, like Checkers or wherever we've got up the road, they have a section with these toffee apples there. And I often walk past there going,
that's to be avoided.
Yes, don't look how yummy that is, but the sugar and then all that programming comes into it. So I mean, we just completely encircled in programs the whole time of do's and don'ts.
And Almin talks about that if you are in perfect mastery, you are immune to everything.
Yeah.
So to grab a toffee apple, and I'm not saying eat 3 a day, however,
but to enjoy that moment.
Yes.
So, I mean, how often do you go to the supermarket?
Yes.
Once a week, twice a week, perhaps, that kind of thing.
So if you're grabbing it once a month or once every couple of months, how wonderful to live in that.
Absolutely.
Because, it's a kind of feeding that inner child.
There was an article Almin wrote on Almin Diary a while ago, and it's stuck with me, so I've brought it up for us today. And she talks there about erasing drama and karma from the higher self in our lives. And the question posed there to Almin was, we have worked at dissolving memories from the past, but what about the good ones? Don't they get wiped out too? So no, they don't, because we still enjoy the toffee apples, obviously.
They inspire us.
Yes, we know what we have to dissolve. Almin's answer, there's a deeply mystical secret within this answer that I will convey as simply as I can. As I've stated before, the soul, or in brackets higher self, has been interfering in an obstructive way with our physical lives. This has occurred in 2 ways. The first one, it has given us dream symbols and dreams to solve and interpret, so that we can solve its unresolved karma for it in the physical. You may recall that the soul had to deal with emotional karma, what we're discussing right now.
Yes.
And then number 2, if we ignore the dream symbols, it will then insert the drama into our lives. These are the memories that we want to erase, the events designed to sabotage the purpose of physical life, which is joy.
Yes.
And then she talks later, and I know her new grandchild there was a picture on Almin Diary of the grandchild with a teddy bear, and she talks about having the first kiss, and these are so important that we retain those particular memories. It's not like we dissolve everything, the programming just dissolves and we are starting afresh.
No,
we're making choices here.
And those memories serve as great inspirations and a launching pad.
Well, we've got a little short Almin audio here. It's a trouble with your higher self. And in this one, she talks about resurrection, which is the merging of parallel realities of life and death. Almin explains how, with the competitive nature of duality, our high bodies have sabotaged the physical experience. Treason.
Yes.
Self-treason.
Yes, self-sabotage.
So treason of the own self-government, governing ability. So there we go. Let's listen to the trouble with your higher self.
In resurrection, the luminous cocoon of man, which we have drawn in many of our books, is replaced. There are physical body, etheric body, and so on, 7 bodies. But it gets replaced because those 7 bodies were separated. Separation in duality was always competitive. So our higher bodies were, in fact, hostilely inclined and sabotaging of physical experience. And this is where people have been getting guidance from. Wait a minute, let me make my pendulum ask my highest self. Should I go on vacation or shouldn't I? No, says highest self, you should keep working until you have a nervous breakdown and then maybe you'll give up. It has been sabotaging of the physical. And yet it has said, I know more than you, physical. The 7 bodies of man disappears as you go through resurrection.
And that was Almin discussing the aspects of the higher self giving us trouble in the physical life, which we've been really discussing. And just between, as we were listening to that, Diane and I were discussing that the addiction to suffering is so strong within many of us. And that is something we have to work on consistently to, not to be that victim and to understand exactly what happens when we swing into that particular mode.
Yes.
I mean, I look around me, my environment helps me a lot. Thankfully, I can see some parts of it. Having a child in the house as well, and how easy they get into self-pity mode and victim mode. And we found ourselves with 2 teenagers here this week. My goodness me, it was like a double onslaught, and Nick and I kept looking at each other going, okay, because they could play against each other so incredibly. The victim mode, if how easy it is to get into.
And it's almost as if it's innate, because a teenager's pretty young. She's lived a couple of years on this planet, and they've already mastered that. I see my grandsons.
Okay.
6 and 2.5 and 1. They are absolute past masters at controlling and holding you captive and getting you to do ultimately what you would want them to do.
We had a friend visit us a few weeks ago and also discussing some of these aspects. And he has a very deep Christian base in terms of, being a pastor and working with things. And we're just discussing, and it's lovely to share opinions and reviews of things. And his question was, he has this need for approval. He can't take disapproval from people. And I understand that. Yes. But then to try and explain it to somebody was not easy for me. And I was just, when I walked away, I thought, it's actually about dissolving it. You don't challenge it, you recognize it, and you just dissolve those particular processes through recognition of the journey. And the only way you can get these experiences is through a journey of recognizing.
Yes.
Otherwise, we're just these open holes of nothingness.
No, that's the thing, Paul. It seems as if everything has to be incorporated and given its place. Almin was talking about honouring life and death, honouring the bodily functions, not giving, and we always give suffering greater value.
Right.
So we've got to maintain that all is valuable, but we cannot value one more than the other. And that's what I love about this particular perspective of life, is that nothing is lost.
Yeah.
And then I began thinking about time. And I began thinking about how linear time actually loses you. So you move from A to B, and then A is gone because now B has arrived. Yeah. Whereas to view time as a kind of standing waveform, as a kind of exponential growth, nothing is lost. It is momentarily displaced. Yeah. So when the wave goes up and crescents, you then move down, but nothing is lost. And I began to see time in that way.
Okay.
And it is just that one continuous movement where nothing is lost. It's all incorporated in the movement.
You may be saying and feeling that you lost compassion even for yourself.
Yes.
But I just want to comment, and I have to do it on air because it's coming up right at this moment, is that what I'm seeing right now for you is that the time on the couch literally was a time of great compassion for yourself, where you can get an understanding like this, because now you have shifted that paradigm of stuck in time and willing to work with the flow and the ebb and flow of everything.
Of this one
that for me is absolute
eternal
love for the self and compassion, because it means you've dissolved something from the old now and the new has
But Paul, how many of us always put the self down and the essence, we forget the essence of who we really are.
Absolutely.
I was listening to an old clip of Almin's where she talks about us being the arrows shot forth from the bow of the infinite. And I love that picture, because we have our being in the infinite, and the infinite has his being or her being in us.
In us,
And I just love
isn't
that
beautiful?
image.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I can't allow dead air time on a radio show
But
like
we're
this.
just looking at each
I'm
other.
staring at each other going, okay, well, let's just handle that for a while. So everyone, please just switch off for a few moments and just imagine the beauty of, and who's shooting the arrow and who's the actual bow. And
isn't that
really
a wonderful
absolutely
image?
beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah, there was a while ago I listened to Almin as well, and she says there that we may have forgotten who we are, but she hasn't.
Sure.
And you mean to have that vision of someone the whole time,
Holding that,
and that's
for
the
us.
only vision she has.
Yes.
That is just incredible. So I think there's a whole lot of stuff going on here.
Sure.
Yeah, so part of our discussion tonight is also about self-healing for Belvaspata masters. And the healing modality of Belvaspata is very important to understand. We'll listen to some information from Almin about that in a few minutes. But basically we want to talk about self-healing. Could consist of using the 13 gates or joints to heal, which you have used, if we're not fully expressing in some part of our body.
Yes.
And holding gratitude that our bodies are communicating this information to us. Can you tell us, and I know some of our listeners are not Belvaspata practitioners, and some are, could you explain what you did there, how that came about?
All right, Paulie, the protocol that I used was taking, because for each joint there is a sigil, and for each joint there is an angel.
Okay.
And so I called on the angel of that particular joint.
Sure.
I took the sigil and I placed it on the joint.
Right.
All the while listening, I can't remember what the elixir, the music was.
Sure.
And I did that for every one of the joints.
Of the 13 joints.
Of the 13 joints, yes. And there's also a mantra which you say. For example, I called on the angel Ukra Varaspi, and that angel talks of releasing limiting beliefs. And the affirmation which I then did was, I am a fluid structure and a formless form. So for each joint there is an affirmation. And I did that. So I didn't use, there is another protocol where you use the various portals
right.
that you can use as well. I didn't use that.
Okay.
I did this one for myself.
Okay.
And you can also do that with the spinal affirmations as well.
Right.
These are the things to promote a healthy life. Talks about that.
Really incredible. And I think also bringing out our opening post from Almin about, removing the obsolete, decaying parts that are no longer necessary for us. They're not part of our identity any longer. They'll just create this addiction that we have to suffer.
And they don't exist. It's only, it's almost like the resonance around it which exists. So it has gone, but it's just the aftermath. And that causes the disorientation and the nausea and all of that, the residue of what is left.
So if any of our listeners wish to receive some of this information from us, for example, the work with the 13 gates of clearing debris from the joints, which is using these portals, then we have that information. It is public knowledge, but we've put it together. And if anybody wants it, please let us know, and you can create a whole healing ceremony for yourself and for others around you without need for the sigils and all of that is used in Belvaspata. So please, you just need to connect with us and send us an email to info@belvaspata.co.za, or just send us a message on our Facebook page, however you feel like connecting with us. Or I think our website's also the contact list as well.
That's a good idea.
And then, we'll happily share that with you, and you can create your own healing ceremony through these joints. And we'll also provide you some information about what each joint represents and how we actually begin to work with it.
And Almin talks about the joints being the portals of transcendence. And just to clarify transcendence, the way that I keep it clear in my head is actually, I think, at number 9 of the inner states of nature, where we talk about the adventure of the dams transcending into a cloud. So that just clarifies that act of transcending. Maybe it is the formless form, the spaceless space. But yes, Paul, there's some fabulous and wonderful protocols that work with the clearing of the joints. And I think with the fluidity of the movement of the joints comes a fluidity of life, comes a lack of density, where we can live those 7 perceptions simultaneously. There's all that amazing perception work that happens.
Just if you get an insight on something, you've had a realization, and that is yours. Yes. Even though we've agreed we might not need it for more than a few seconds, because it will go to make way for whatever else is coming. But then the next journey unfolds, and our identity has to shift each and every time we have these flashes of inspiration or these flashes of realization, I think, because those become more real for us.
What I've just remembered when you spoke those words is that during this process, I had a sort of a vision of this tree, and the dead leaves were just blowing off the tree, but the tree was never left without any foliage. So it was just a continual replacement.
The cycle of experience.
And the abundance. Because what is victimhood about? I haven't got enough. And I'm talking for myself here. Yeah. And that was one of the issues that I worried about, was not having enough. Yeah. A lack of abundance.
So I think you've been dissolving everything that was holding you back from living in the fullness of trust.
Yes.
Which, as we know, is one of our great ascension attitudes within Belvaspatar healing. So this will be interesting for you to be able to work with this on a different level for yourself. And that's what it's about, experiencing it and putting it into play, and then experiencing it.
A practical thing. Yeah. We talked pre-show about, I said it's almost an overwhelming deluge of information, and I write everything down. And I actually just decided that I've got to start balancing it with experience. Otherwise, it's just words on paper.
It's just theory, isn't it?
Yes.
You know, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's such an important understanding, to have a practical and a theoretic process. And this is what I think, was it last week or the week before I was saying on the show? You know, when does your boyfriend actually become your partner? When does your child become this? When we allow it.
Yes.
Otherwise, we keep holding them in that thing. I mean, I know this, and I'm repeating again, excuse me for that, but I know this couple who've been together for many years, and they still refer to each other as a boyfriend or this, or, you know, and I'm going, I'd expect something a bit different at this point, because there must be a transition. But obviously it suits them to keep that particular process going. But yeah,
it talks of needs.
Yeah. When do we actually transition to a point where we have transcended the need for those identities and those titles?
But as you just said, when you allow it.
You know?
When you allow it.
And I think part of that is trust and working with all of that. So we're uncovering a lot on today's show. It's absolutely fascinating. Let's listen now to Almi. We're going to talk, it's a short audio on how does Belvaspatar work. And then we're going to have a little bit, and there's some interviews with her. It's only a few minutes long.
Lovely.
But Almi talks about the process of newness that's coming in.
Okay.
When we were in a descension cycle, the martyrs of that descension cycle during those deep stages of the dream were the light workers. And the reason that this was the case is that during the descension, the opposite matter and energy were in fact attracting one another. So light workers, even as babies coming into a uterus, were often attracted by opposite matter. A lower level mother than what the baby was. High level mother often would attract a very low level child, because these opposite matter and energy attracted. What it also meant is that light worker was clustered. And remember, this went on all the way until August of 2006. So life was hard then. We attracted around us all those who were what we were not. If we were honest, they were dishonest. And we often fail to recognize this because during those times, one could only recognize that which was within yourself. This is your way of being in oneness with infinite life that lies beyond the matrix of opposites.
I got the sense from her that she's outside the fishbowl projecting the hologram of herself into our fishbowl.
Before she really started speaking, there was an energetic shift. I could feel like I was in the presence of someone other than anybody I'd ever met before.
I was changed forever by being in her presence for a very short time.
The way that she's able to capture the energy and the information of the process that we're going through for human evolution allowed me to deepen my awareness of complete self-acceptance.
In the memory that once before duality began, each and every one here had an eternal portion of themselves, like a current in an infinite ocean that has no shores.
She was answering questions that I had only asked in my heart.
There's a direct energy transmission happening, and the words aren't nearly as important as just being open to the energy.
Things were opening up in my body and information was being stored where it needed to, and so in the future when I needed that aha moment, it would come up to my consciousness.
Overwhelming, unknowable knowledge that she has is intense. Yeah.
It was really profound for me, and like David was saying too, it was just being in the presence of somebody that fully embodies their God consciousness.
She was describing this position, like this unlimited potential of emptiness.
But there is a peace within you that has known forever that you are a unique current that never ends, without beginning and without end, and without polarity.
And you're back in studio with myself, Paul, sharing my space with Diane today as we're discussing Treason, as we're discussing Transcendence, and we'll have to be going to go buy some toffee apples after this just to get some of the inner child process going. But Diane, what a fascinating show we've got sharing some of the processes. I'm so blown away by that bit of audio that we had there. And it really just, once again, puts everything into a context of understanding.
And Paul, it seems as if, as you mentioned now, that the process of seeking is at an end. It is now remembering and manifesting. And there's that subtle feeling that everything has changed.
I think there's an underlying experience for me is that I know there's such a difference, a different way, and that is innate within me. Mm-hmm. And all I need to just dissolve a few things that are just stopping me from experiencing it. Yes. And that's what I've got out of preparing for our show tonight. I got that earlier today. It was just one of those wow moments yet again of wow, and you can't explain any more than wow. And I know many of our light families will understand these beautiful moments.
Yes. That words just fall short.
There is no words to describe it. In fact, you were saying earlier there were some words you used to use. They're gone. You can't even bring them up anymore.
The old way of negotiating or dealing with a particular situation that was conflicting. I simply cannot use the words that I have used in the past.
Yeah.
I cannot bring them to my mouth.
Absolutely. I understand that. It's just you're done with that process now. So you see, lying on the couch with a hip did you good.
But Paul, talking about that, this is all about self-referral and about authentic living and about self-governance. And I love this comment that Almin made, that we need to be obviously more active in our self-government or governance. Yeah. And she talks about being unvoted by man and appointed by the infinite. Wow. I think she was talking about the presidential election.
I know she had a comment there.
Yes. Yeah. And I've actually written this down so that I would not forget it. Unvoted by man, appointed by the infinite.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of governance that we are looking at.
Well, I said that 2 weeks ago, so I'll have to reference the show, but I said that, it's exactly like saying, when will we realize that we are the gods? Oh, that was last week's show.
Yes.
When we are the actual gods with no ego in it.
No.
We have a role to play.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when will we step into the fullness of that role in governing ourselves and able to do that?
Yes.
And I think the frustrations have been there for many, including Almin, when we look at some of the comments, and I know one was removed, which is highly unusual, but it just shows, the moment is there. Let's, you're not dealing with this anymore. We're done.
Yes, and it's this inner child that refuses to now take any responsibility, that just wants to play.
Yeah.
And I think she actually mentions that we cannot remain in this childish role. And I'm not saying negating the inner child at all, but there is an element of childishness that must be put aside.
The infantile state of being.
Yes.
Yeah.
That must be put aside, because I think she talks about doing the work. We are the way showers. We can't be children, for we lead mankind. Those were her words. Yes.
And, the babies of the resurrection also have to walk through doors all the time.
Yes.
Wow. Well, we have another landmark coming up as well, because today is the 1st of December. So the world celebrates it as World AIDS Day.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to share something that I saw today, and I know I've posted up on Facebook page, so it's probably done the rounds in terms of our Light family. But just to share, I'm so excited when something manifests, and I've been waiting for it. So July 2008, when Almin was here, she was teaching in Johannesburg, and she brought in a clear message from the Library of the Ants that culminated in the comment that AIDS is finished and is no more. I've always wondered about that process and why it would come out whilst she was here in South Africa. So, by the way, when I was busy putting this together today, I looked down, there were ants crawling all over my sleeve. But anyway, today, on World's AIDS Day, there's an article just got posted up about a new landmark human HIV vaccine trial that has just arrived and been put into practice within South Africa. So I'm clear about the many posts and issues. I'm not in for vaccines and all of that, but I understand that something has now shifted, and it has taken 8 years for us to get to this particular point of realizing that humanity is ready to clear it away.
Yes.
Because we all know that any of illnesses, they're illusions, but I think AIDS is one of the biggest illusions. And I'll tell you why I'm thinking that, because when I looked at the relevant library information, and there's 130 libraries altogether, part of it goes, there's a god from the south, Almin. And when we look at the Library of the Ants, where it is, she's in Newport, in Oregon, in Portland, Oregon. That's where she lives, right? And so I've combined the two together. So the Libraries of the White Horse is South Africa, and the Libraries of the Ants is Newport, Oregon. Sure. So now I found the handwritten prophecies that we wrote, which was done in a lot of runes and that in those days, which were the precursor to a lot of that. I just want to read those prophecies because they're fascinating. And I think they will also highlight some of our discussion, because obviously as we are shifting everything in the world, then humanity also has to get ready to shift everything else.
Yes.
I mean, it is equal for everybody, but not at the same time frames. So I can't read the ant language properly. But for anybody who's travelled Ethiopian Airlines, it sounds identical, but I won't even try. But anyway, the translation is, a god most luminous comes from the south to rid the world of its guilt of the root. Disease is gone, no longer is it real. What then the disease that humanity still feels? It's a dream that man manifests that reminds him to heal. Flaws in perception and distortion, Almin's writing, he feels, a dream he will manifest, a desolating scourge. It's guilt of the root chakra, and Almin talks about sexuality to go with that. And of course we know the diversity of a lot of the processes here. A wasting disease that ends all other disease on earth. Once it is seen for the dream that it is, the illusion will be gone of all other disease. And a note here, when AIDS is overcome by someone, they become immune to all other diseases. The second part of the prophecy, the white cells in the blood studied will be, man will use it to indicate the wasting disease. Can he not see that this cannot be? For mother has metamorphosized the human species. Protectiveness is no longer a reality. No white cells are needed to protect against disease. Thus, in the highly evolved, white blood cells are no more, for disease is no longer a reality as it was before. There is no protection needed against one's own dreams. When perception is gained, the dream no longer shall be. And just a note, Armin says that the diminishing white blood cell count is used to track HIV infections and the level of infection that is coming up. But Diane, this is what we're actually saying, is we were talking about the aspects of needing to protect ourselves. Yes. I mean, in there's just little glimpses of what we're experiencing in our day-to-day lives. Yes. And so it's taken 8 years to get to this point where she actually said that. And I always, for the weeks after that, I was looking at HIV statistics and how it had actually increased. And I'm going, no way, lady, and I had all of these things going on. And eventually I just realized it's going to take time for us to see what has been prophesied. And it takes time because you and me and everyone else has to do the work in order for us to be ready for that particular journey.
Well, Paul, I've always liked the idea of us being mountain climbers, and we're all linked, with this rope. Right. And I was thinking that perhaps the fibers of the rope are made up of praise, love, gratitude and trust. And yes, I think we've all been linked in climbing this mountain.
Absolutely.
And then today, voila, there is this
and there we come. And I'm just saying, yes, a vaccine, how successful it will be, we don't know that. I mean, we know we have a trial vaccine.
Yes.
But the fact that it can possibly and has a potential to heal humanity from the greatest scourge this earth has ever seen is fascinating to me.
It also indicates that some illusions have shifted.
Yeah.
And some debris has removed.
Has gone.
Yes.
So we'll see all of that coming up now as things alter and shift. I think it's really exciting. Right, so in the messages for Lightworkers, which we've just been going through, and again, we can't go through the whole thing because it is a subscription channel, but Armin talks about the illusion of fulfillment. And, we shouldn't be chasing fulfillment. We already are it. And there's just some points that I wanted to bring up which highlights where we're at with our show. The reason that, by the way, Armin is talking about the alien infiltration. And if you go onto YouTube, everyone, there is a beautiful video there, and it shows thousands or many aliens leaving the moon. It's a very, very popular viral video. And if you look at that particular video, you can actually see a camera focus on the moon. You can actually see these spaceships coming off the moon.
Sure.
And the audio on it is really deep. It says possibly, it doesn't tell you it is, but it's saying is that in the raw material they can actually see things leaving the moon there. And Almin's really talking about in the last few days how there are no more aliens left on this particular, on our planet. They've gone. And she talks about how they've been shifted and all of that. So really incredible to know. And I'm just going, all these programming and all these things that we're doing are all alien to us. They're aliens. They don't belong in any of us any longer. And this is why we're able to dissolve them and recognize them and just get rid of them. To let our natural consciousness of God consciousness just burst forth.
Evolve.
Yeah.
And if you think of it symbolically, that which is alien to our natural state of perfection, of harmony,
and
of
fulfillment,
health.
just living in it, not seeking it anymore. So I'm so excited about that shift, and so much has come together this week. I'm very grateful for Almin.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Almin says we resist our efforts to evict alien infiltrations from the earth is because there's an alien belief within us that must be eliminated. When we do so, they'll be forced to go. So we must do the inner work. They don't belong because they're representative.
Yes.
The unnatural belief that we need to seek fulfillment must be seen for the illusion it is. Fulfillment has been sought through activity, through finding worthwhile endeavors that bring satisfaction. This keeps us in an ever-reaching rat race. It's a search for meaning. Have you also had this, things are meaningless lately? It's like life is meaningless because it's shifted. If you look at it from those eyes, there's no meaning to it any longer unless we're looking at it from a completely different viewpoint. So yeah, okay, fulfillment is the aware acceptance of what the moment brings. Like sunshine and shade, life brings times of activity and passivity, which is inner space and outer realities. So you were talking about that earlier. Honor both by cooperating with the rhythms of life. Fulfillment does not come from getting what we want, but from appreciating what we have. How can then we be anything other than fulfilled?
But that also is a different perspective, that the moment, which is continually replenished, has everything that you need.
And brand new in every single moment. So to be able to see it from that incredible viewpoint, I just so inspired.
Paul, imagine, I mean, we've had a taste of this, and imagine putting one foot in front of the other and feeling fulfilled at every point. Imagine there'll be no need to ever garner any forces, because you would have every element at your fingertips. The master then, with an agendaless life, could manifest.
Just expressing absolutely perfect in that moment, because that's what it is, and only that.
And Paul, and we were talking earlier about talking to ourselves, and that takes a whole lot of pressure off, because you are not trying to draw attention to yourself. You're not trying to convince, to persuade, to make anyone more than what they are. You are simply meeting yourself 1,000 times a day. You are yourself talking to yourself.
Seeing those viewpoints that can change and alter, and you've got so many to work from, and there's no right or wrong in any of it.
There's no judgment there. There's no divisions.
Haven't we done just such a beautiful job of inspiring ourselves tonight?
So congratulations, Paul.
Thank you. Congratulations to you, Diane. So we're going to close our show off just to give a tribute to those people at Standing Rock at the reservation in Dakota there. We know it's an ongoing process and we're watching it. And for me, it's so absolutely fascinating at the standoff that is going on and how things are developing. And I'm just in absolute awe at the warriors. And these are young warriors that are standing there with absolute meaning and will not give in despite what comes on. And they're being supported from around the world. And we were saying pre-show is that, like you brought up now during the show, this aspect of the tree. And what I was saying is about, rock is so appropriate in terms of the description of where we're at. But we also have to allow ourselves to weather according to the weather. We're not just this rock that's going to be solid and strong all day long. We have to weather, it have to change, and it will change shape. It's formless and yet formed, and it's going to take time, but we have to allow all of that particular process within ourselves. So your hip was just part of the rock reforming and just weathering a little bit, and then bringing up something new for you to work with, and you're standing much stronger.
And I love that idea of the warrior standing against illusion, weeding out illusions
all the time and just working with it. Really incredible. And coming from a native tribe, or tribes actually, because all the tribes are uniting against,
and that's unusual.
Really incredible.
There was always those fractions that just could never unite, and there they stand like the heron in absolute poise.
Absolutely, and the dignity is really incredible from what I can see, and I hope it's not just mainstream media that I'm seeing, but I'm trying to look deeper as we're going along. So what happened is there's a father and son called the Zotich Singers, and they've demonstrated their solidarity with the prayer warriors there that are standing against the Dakota Access Pipeline, and they've offered them an honor song from the tribe of Kiowa. So I'd like to just play that to go out with tonight, and then just to say goodbye to everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. Michelle, thank you very much for your online comments tonight. We recognize exactly what you're saying, and thank you for being part of our team at the same time. And thank you to all our listeners, whether new or returning ones. We really value all the contributions. And please connect with us through www.belvaspita.co.za. We are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, and by now you know that we are on air every single Thursday. Diane, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Paul. Good night, everyone.
We say goodbye, and we'll see you again soon.
My name is Ralph Zotai, and this is my son Dennis. We wish we could be there in Standing Rock in North Dakota to be with the prayer warriors that are all there, but what we want to do is, as our contribution, we want to render this honor song. Hey, hey, oh, yo, hey, yo, oh, yo, hey, hey, oh, yo, hey, yo, oh, yo, hey, 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 oh, yo, hey, yo, yo, hey, hey, boy, mama, katasa, hey, yo, oh, yo, hey, 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 go kida, yeah, yo, yo, hey, hey, yo, hey, 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 yo, oh, yo, hey, 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 boy, mama, katasa, hey, yo, oh, yo, hey, 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 go kida, yeah, yo, yo, hey, hey, yo, hey, boy, mama, katasa, hey, yo, oh, yo, hey, 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 go kida, yeah, yo, yo, hey, hey, yo, hey, hey, yo, hey, yo, oh, yo, hey, 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 boy, mama, katasa, hey, yo, oh, yo, hey, hey, go kida, yeah, yo, yo, hey, boy, mama, katasa, hey, yo, oh, yo, hey, go kida, yeah.
You've been listening to Radio Balbaspata, South Africa. Thank you for listening and sharing in our discussion. Should you have any questions with regards to the healing modality of Balbaspata or have any healing needs, please send us an email to info@balbaspata.co.za or add comments to our page on Spreaker.com so we can work on providing a suitable response. We now close this episode with the eternal ascension qualities of love, praise, gratitude and trust, and look forward to sharing again with you next week. Goodbye.